They're good people, but now you know the deal. If the camera angle is off, it's not by design and blind when it comes with the territory.
Behind it.
Well, look at that. Look at that. Clearly the MK is one for stunts. They feel like they have not been getting the attention that other news stories have been receiving of late. And in true MK style or fashion, they have stunted and made an announcement. But it was so low-key the way they went about it, right? They just issued a statement that, oh no, His Excellency President Jacob Zuma will be conducting a presser. And then, of course, South African journalists misguided in their news telling. Actually, it was classic misinformation. So that this is when he will respond to the news coming from the High Court that he should pay his legal fees, at least the fees that were stacked up during his tenure as president. And they somehow slaughtered it in their news bulletins that, yeah, this is when he will talk about this issue. And no, it wasn't to be, right? They rocked up, presumably the entire leadership, the high command structure of uMkhonto weSizwe, and read a statement. But the statement was not the announcement itself. The announcement was left for the very last paragraph. In fact, the man himself had to come and make the announcement. Cloak and dagger stuff. And yeah, I mean, the statement in itself was a bit banal, nothing really outstanding or shocking in that, right? It was the politics of the day, them giving their assessment of the situation, and also then talking about international relations and marking the era that we are going through. I think that was good, right? I think that was notable. But of course, there were just these cliches, right? Rhetoric that we've become accustomed to. How much they denounce the government of national unity and so on and so forth, right? Nothing really new there. But what was moving, and I think it was a masterful political tactic, was to talk about, and I see that this is not making news, the deaths of the children who fell victim to the poisoned snacks in South African townships, particularly in Soweto. That was a good thing, right? I felt that was nice, to see them mentioning that and going as far as to say that there will be a class action. That's going to be quite interesting. Well, it not, because we know this dichotomy, right? Zuma versus the judicial system, for example, and the competing narratives about how those situations usually play out. And it's going to be interesting to see that in a class action suit, how are prominent voices going to posture when it involves the lives that have been lost and those families in terms of how they are affected. Right? It's going to be an interesting moment, and to see how, first of all, government handles it, and then how the judiciary handles it if it gets that far. And I think there's something to look into. It's something that any legal person or who has an interest in legal matters should follow, but also it's a matter that has social significance, societal significance, dare I say. And just like the MK of course, I have deferred mentioning that Tony Yengeni is joining or has joined the MK party as its second deputy president. Very interesting, right? I think where I'm concerned, I've always believed that Yengeni is low-key in touch with uMkhonto Zuma. And of course, they discuss politics. I don't think that's anything surprising in that. I just did not expect that at this juncture, he will be playing such a prominent role within the MK party. But their justification, because they were running away from the narrative that uMkhulu umdala, right? They do mention that he's at an advanced age. They use the justification that uMkhulu is traveling quite a lot externally. And that makes sense in the sense that clearly when there are international trips to be made in those countries or those dignitaries or those diplomats, they look forward to speaking to the former president of South Africa, right? And not other regular folk within the MK party, right? And now it leaves some type of a vacuum. But he is also at an advanced age, as the MK party has said. But they don't have someone who has that political prowess. Now, I'm not saying someone who is necessarily a crowd puller, but someone who understands the dynamics, right? Who understands the balance of forces, who understands the history, not only of uMkhonto weSizwe in terms of a movement or liberation army that it was, but also the African National Congress, kwaKoko, right? And also what's playing out currently within South African politics. And what better person than Yengeni, right? I think an argument can be made that could they not poach another top person within the ANC, right? There are notable leaders within the ANC who have served in its high structures, like your Sisulus, for example. Be that as it may, I think part of the argument is going to be that, hey, right? But is it really? Considering how South African society is responding to the MK party, right? The MK party seems to be saying, well, we're not going to necessarily play into the politics of gender equality, etc., etc. We're just going to do it as we do it. Call us patriarchal, what have you, in terms of mainstream politics, but we know how people are responding on the ground to us, right? To this patriarchal structure that we have going on. So it then leads to what? This announcement, right? On the one hand, you've got Dr. John Hlophe as the first deputy president, and he will continue his work in parliament. And then the second deputy president is Yengeni. And these are interesting dynamics where I'm concerned, because Dr. Hlophe, he is supposed to lead the charge in the legislature, right? And you would expect him to be on the ball and so on and so forth. But that team in its entirety, let's not front, that team is lacking when it comes to the politics of the day, right? They just don't seem to be gelling, and they don't seem to be connecting with the people on the ground. So in comes Yengeni. What is he meant to do? I don't think he's going to be a structure person. I don't think he can work within those confinements. He's the type of person that you bring in terms of politics, in terms of how I read him and have read him, when you have clear systems and some type of institution going on. And then he is then supposed to be doing the networking. He's supposed to be working the ground on some level, right? And it's going to be interesting to see how he does that. Now, this is someone who also has relationships with other politicians from other formations, like uFaru, for example, right? We know that they have a good friendship. So it will be interesting to see how this impacts the relations between uMkhonto weSizwe and the economic freedom fighters, even though uFaru is known for being churlish and childish. So I don't think anything major is going to happen on that front. But in a critical moment, would it? Especially with uFaru slowly but surely losing relevance? I think we need to watch the space when it comes to that. And then, of course, Yengeni still has his good folk, just like uMkhulu does within kwaGogo, right? Particularly the NEC. So things are coming to a head, and now that there are Amahem, and some of us have predicted on this since the beginning of the year, that the MK is indeed looking to form some type of relationship with the ANC, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. This is where this appointment is going to be critical, because now it's going to be the politics of deal making, the politics of working and collaborating with other people, right? Whereas uMkhulu, his need to cement international allies for the MK party. I'm getting the sense that as much as there is talk about rescuing the ANC brand is so damaged, right? With all these revelations and talks about corruption and criminality, and most of those are self-inflicted, that there is no hope for saving the ANC in the interim, right? Maybe one day will it come back? Yeah. But let's also bear in mind the fact that we are going through a phase of coalition politics, right? Funny enough, it's not the first time South Africa goes through this. But anyway, that's an aside. So for the next 10, 20 years, this is going to be the talk of town, and the ANC is going to be dwindling more and more and more. But there is still much to be said about the ANC in terms of its history, its prestige in terms of yesteryear, you're right? And there are many people who want to hold on to that, right? Who want to pay homage to that. And we can't just discount it on the face of what's going on today, right? And we know that the feeling of nostalgia, it always will be there, right? As much as some of us may be fed up with the ANC and talking about never ever considering it in terms of voting, think about it in 15 years' time, 20 years' time. How will people think or reminisce about the ANC, right? Will it be any value, or will there be any value in rescuing it? So, Yengeni is a critical figure, especially during times when uMkhulu might be struggling in terms of age, ailments, nature taking its course. We don't know how this may pan out over the next 4 years, and if he will be able to bring in other big people, or at least collaborate and form coalitions with other prominent figures within South African politics. Why not, right? And besides, Yengeni, I mean, the first time I heard about Yengeni, I think it was following his conviction or being implicated in that arms deal saga, right? And he had just gone back home, and he was doing a ritual, right? A ceremony, right? This is my introduction to politics, early days, right? Apart from history of politics, about Chris Hani and all those fellows. He then speared an ox, right? And you need to understand that he does this in a suburb. And at the time, boy, oh boy, oh boy, was there a furore or what? People in those suburbs were mad, right? White folk weren't having any of it. And that's how I got to learn about the man, because I was like, yo, this man wenza umsebenzi emasababu, and he pretty much declared it as his divine right, to worship his ancestors and all these type of things. And here are people fighting against it. And part of the narrative is that, no, he's a criminal, right? But of course, then it involved animal rights and all those type of things. And voila, I started to understand narratives and how they work. That is my memory of Yengeni in terms of politics. Of course, nowadays he commentates a lot in terms of social media about what's going on and on and on. And I think he may have to curtail that a little bit, even though it's a good enough role considering that, his commentary is generally in line with the MK party. Now the question will be, how will others within the MK accept this, right? Siyazi ukuthi khona uSikhothani uyinkinga, right? Kakhulukhuluma gijima kuSisiduduzile, for example. uSikhothani ngiyambona, even now they still use him for presses, he's still the spokesperson, and he still behaves like a groupie. So he's one of the figures that you need to take note of in terms of his posture, how he reacts to this appointment. Is he going to be the problem child yet again? It will be interesting, right? I think it will be worthwhile for a media house or two to call Yengeni to an interview, right? Speak to him, but quiz him, not necessarily on, why did you make this move? But test his intellectual thinking. Where is he at the moment, right? Where's his game at? And that will be the test as far as I'm concerned. But otherwise, look, the MK has not lost anything through this appointment. I think it's a decent appointment where they're concerned. It's a matured appointment, especially after the Shivambu debacle. I don't think that was handled pretty well. But this is someone who can calm the waters politically in terms of an MK flavored way. This is the person that I think uMkhonto Zuma had to persuade and be like, come on board and let's see how it goes. Figile for Pambalula. He's probably drafting an expulsion letter as we speak, but no one is really going to care about that. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree?